Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new here. I hope you have all had a great week. I'm Andrea M and this is Real Crime Down Under, or as we've christened it because it is freezing here in Australia, as I keep talking about every week, but the cold we're having this winter is quite unbelievable. It's a Real Crime and Coffee Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday whenever you're watching this. Grab a coffee, grab a snack, or maybe don't grab a snack for this one, because before we get into today's case, I need to give a massive trigger warning, and it is for violence and an extremely violent SA. So the case I'm presenting today is nothing short of horrific, so if you choose to continue to watch, please just prepare yourself. Also, before we get into today's case, can I please ask you to consider subscribing to my channel if you've not done so already? Turn on notifications so you never miss a video, and share to your socials. It's subs like you who allow me to continue making content just like this. So a massive thank you to all of you who have already subscribed, and the rest of you, what are you waiting for? It's free and I'd be only too pleased to have you back. So without further ado, let's jump into today's case, and I'm naming this one Australian Horror Story: The Senseless Murder of Daughter, Beauty Queen and Nurse Anita Cobby. Anita Cobby was born as Anita Lynch in Sydney on the 2nd of November 1959 to Gary Bernard Lynch, a graphic artist with the Royal Australian Air Force, and Grace Peggy Lynch, a nurse. As a teenager, she participated in beauty pageants, including winning the Miss Western Suburbs pageant in November of 1979, where she was sashed by the then Premier Neville Wran. She also had a promising career as a model. However, she decided to instead follow in her mother's footsteps and also became a nurse. In interviews that followed the horrific events of today's case, Anita's mother would tell reporters that she was surprised and delighted when Anita chose to follow her into the profession, as she hadn't really showed that much interest in nursing earlier in her life. Anita also met her future husband John Cobby while studying for her nursing degree at Sydney Hospital. They married on the 27th of March 1982, and at the time of Anita's murder in 1986, the couple had separated, and she was living with her parents in Blacktown, New South Wales. According to John, he and Anita were actually on very good terms when she was murdered, which is upsetting for him, and they had been planning to reconcile, and he was really looking forward to reconciling with Anita and starting their lives over. So Anita worked in Sydney and commuted daily from her home in Blacktown. On the day of her murder, she finished work at Sydney Hospital at around 3 p.m. in the afternoon and met friends for dinner in nearby Redfern, and they were two of her nursing colleagues. Cobby then caught a train from Central Railway Station back to Blacktown Station. Arriving at Blacktown, she would usually ring her father, who would come to pick her up. On the day of her death, she most likely decided to walk home after finding the phone to be out of order, and there were no taxis available at the taxi rank outside the station. As Anita begins the 30-minute walk home, she is unaware that at a nearby pub, trouble is brewing. 5 friends, John Travers, Michael Murdoch, and brothers Michael Stewart and Les Murphy, are drinking and discussing horrendous things. The eldest of the Murphy boys, Michael, is actually on the run at this time, having escaped from Silverwater Prison, where he was being held for armed robbery. He and John Travers, who had a particularly callous and sadistic streak, are playing pool and egging each other on. Travers had also been in trouble with the law prior to the night in question. He was caught using marijuana when he was just 13 years of age, and by 14 was an alcoholic. He had a reputation for extreme violence and often carried a knife. A series of further criminal activities during his teenage years, he was often reprimanded by local police and the courts. His parents had little or no control over him at all. And you may want to skip forward 5 minutes, as I have to give a trigger warning for animal cruelty when profiling John Travers for this next part, so skip over this if you don't want to hear it. So Travers was also known to display extreme cruelty to animals from an early age, and that is a common trait of most serial killers. He was described as a zoo sadist. He was known to have had, and this, can't believe I'm about to say this, had sexual intercourse with animals he had stolen before slitting their throats, and several people had actually witnessed him doing this. And it was mainly sheep that he'd do this to. Don't listen to this next part if you don't want to hear it, but it goes kind of is important for later as it goes to Travis's personality. So what they'd say he would do is he would have intercourse with a sheep, and then he would slit the animal's throat, he would dress it out, and then he would put it on the backyard spit roast, and then he would eat it. So that is the mentality that we are dealing here with John Travers. So Les and Stuart Murphy are also criminals, but they're sort of more into petty crime at that stage. And they are actually under the complete thrall of Travers and their elder brother Michael. With them was also Michael Murdoch, and he was a childhood friend and criminal associate of Travers. He had also spent a great part of his childhood in juvenile prisons, where he himself experienced SAs. He was known to have written to politicians during this period of imprisonment seeking protection from such assaults, which I find extremely ironic and absolutely disgusting as this story unfolds. So they're pretty drunk by this stage, and they've been working each other up all night, and the five of them leave the pub and drive off in a stolen vehicle that they lifted from a couple of suburbs over. It is as they are driving the lonely late-night streets of the Sydney suburbs, they decide they are going to abduct someone for tonight's entertainment. It is at the same time Anita is approaching her home on that warm night in February that she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I have to warn you guys again, this gets pretty graphic and is nothing short of horrific, so please be prepared. Anita was walking alone from the station along Newton Road, Blacktown at around 10 p.m. when the gang of 5 men drove up beside her and stopped their stolen white HG Holden Kingswood. 2 of the men leapt from the car and dragged her into the vehicle. Anita immediately began trying to fight the men off. She kicked, she screamed, she made as much noise as she could. And there was a teenage boy and his younger sister and his mother at home. They heard somebody screaming from the street in front of their house and had gone outside in time to see Anita being forced into the attacker's car. And the boy told his sister to call the police, and he actually ran over and he tried to save Anita. He ran across the road to help, but the car drove off before he could reach it. And he would later go on to say he was this close. He was so close to saving her. So he returned home, where his mother and sister had telephoned the police to report what they had seen. A few minutes later, their older brother came home, and after being told of the abduction, he drove off in his car to search for Anita and the car full of men. So the brother of the 2 teens eventually drove down Reen Road, as it was known back then, but now it's known as Peter Brock Drive in Prospect. And he stopped by the now empty Holden, where he used a spotlight to search in the adjacent paddock. After seeing nothing in the paddock and believing that the car he was looking for was a different model of Holden, he returned home to check on his family and check in with how they were going with the police. So the attackers would later state that they had hidden in the long grass to avoid the spotlight and waited for the man to leave. So we go back to once they have Anita inside the car on Newton Road. She had been ordered to strip off her clothes but refused, begging her attackers to let her go. She was saying to them that she was married and that she had her period, but they didn't care. They ripped her clothes off. They punched Anita repeatedly, breaking her nose and both her cheekbones before forcing themselves on her and forcing her to perform depraved sexual acts on all 5 men. The attackers then brazenly drove to a service station to purchase fuel using money stolen from Anita's purse. It was then she was driven down Reen Road to the secluded paddock. While being held down in the car and sexually assaulted repeatedly and being continually beaten by the 5 attackers. They then dragged the brutally beaten woman into the paddock and dragged her mercilessly through a barbed wire fence. And the coroner would go on to say, and the crime scene techs that later were investigating the scene of where Anita was found, that they could tell she had just been dragged through this barbed wire fence. I mean, she's been repeatedly SA'd, she's been bashed, she's been forced to do things that she'd never do. She's already in so much pain and anguish, and these men just dragged her through a barbed wire fence. And the police would go on to say they could tell that she had not been lifted over or helped over the fence, that she had been dragged. And I can't even begin to imagine the horror and the terror that Anita Cobby was feeling that night. And you have to think, this is 5 men, and she was a very small woman. 5 men. Honestly, to me, when I watch a reenactment, when I was doing my research for this case that was presented by Steve Leibman and Crime Investigation Australia, the reenactment was brutal enough. And hearing the actress scream who was playing Anita, it's just, oh, it's unimaginable. And I was only like 12 when Anita Cobby was murdered, but I still remember the anger and the outrage that gripped the entire country back then. And like Sally Ann Huckstedt and Juanita Nilsson that I presented last week, she was somebody else I could never forget. And I've wanted to do her story on here for quite some time. I did notice that a couple of my colleagues had also covered Anita's story, and I didn't want to sort of be doing my video straight after them. So this is why it's taken me a little while to do it. But now I'm doing it for Anita. So it's just, again, people like this need to be held accountable for what they do, and the victims and their families need to never be forgotten, and that's what these videos are all about. So after dragging Anita through the fence, they then dumped her into the paddock and continued to assault her sexually and physically for quite some time. According to his taped confession, one of the attackers, and probably the worst of them all, John Travis, then became concerned that Anita could identify them because she had seen their faces and heard them call each other by name, and convinced the other attackers and convinced the others that were in on the attack that they needed to kill her. When they found they couldn't do it, they then urged Travis to slit her throat, and he did. He slit Anita's throat so brutally that her head was almost severed. And then they just walked off and left Anita to bleed out, where she tragically lost her life. When Anita did not return home, her family was initially thinking, oh, maybe she stayed overnight with a friend. But she did do that a lot, particularly if she was working a late shift and she had to go in early. She would stay with friends in the city rather than returning to her parents' home in Blacktown. However, the family soon learned that she failed to appear at work the next day and reported her missing on the 3rd of February 1986. And chillingly, during an interview later with 60 Minutes Australia, Anita's father would say on the night of Anita's death he was having trouble sleeping. He was worried already that she had still not returned home. And he would go on to say that he had been looking out the window for her when he noticed an ominous-looking cloud overshadow the moon. He would go on to say he was gripped by a feeling of pure evil and terror, and that the cloud looked like a sinister evil face. It was at this moment, close to midnight on the night of Anita's death, and her father felt something was terribly wrong, and the coroner would go on to say that Anita's time of death was around midnight. On the morning of the 4th of February, her battered and naked body was found in the paddock by a farmer who was investigating what his cows were milling around. Cobby's body was initially identified by her distinctive interlocking Russian wedding ring, which was still on her finger when she was found. Her estranged husband John was initially suspected of her murder, but he was quickly cleared. The Australian public reacted with anger upon hearing the details of Anita's murder. On the 6th of February, the New South Wales state government posted a $50,000 reward for information leading to the capture of Cobby's killers. Also on the 6th of February, morning radio host John Laws obtained a leaked copy of Cobby's autopsy report, which contained explicit details of her injuries, and read it live on the air, both shocking and galvanising public sentiment. In a 2016 interview with 7 News, Laws said he did it because he felt the general public ought to know, and that it incited anger in the public that murders like this were happening and weren't being given the full details. On the 9th of February, police reenacted Cobby's movements on the night of her disappearance in the hope of jogging the memories of travellers or others who may have seen her that night. Constable Debbie Wallace wore a similar outfit to Cobby and travelled on the 9:12 p.m. train to Blacktown. Detectives interviewed the passengers and showed them photos of Cobby whilst Wallace walked the length of the train during the journey. Following a tip-off from a police informant regarding a stolen Holden, police started searching immediately for Travers, Michael Murdoch, and brothers Les, Michael, and Gary Murphy, after they discovered that some of them had a history of violence and that Travers had a reputation for carrying a knife. On the 21st of February, police arrested Travers and Murdoch at the home of Travers's uncle and Les Murphy at Travers's own house. Murdoch and Murphy were charged with offences related to stolen cars and released on police bail at this time. Travers, who admitted he had stolen a car, made conflicting statements about the murder and was detained in police custody. And this is where he makes the biggest mistake of his life, apart from murdering Anita. While in custody, he requested that a friend be called so that she could bring him some cigarettes, and the police jumped at this opportunity. The phone number was handed to the police, who then contacted the friend, a woman. The woman, Travis's aunt, eventually dubbed Miss X, agreed to help with the investigation. She met with an officer and gave him details of Travis's background. Miss X was subsequently sent back in to talk to Travers, agreeing to hide a recording microphone device in her bra while she visited him in his cell. She was able to obtain a confession. Miss X later went to Murdoch's home while wearing the concealed recording device to capture his statements on tape as well. And I can imagine Miss X would have been absolutely terrified doing this for the police and for Anita, but she did it. And I think that was incredibly brave of her. So eventually, because of the help that Miss X rendered to the police, the 5 men were arrested and charged with the murder. Police were praised for their quick response in capturing all suspects involved. In total, only 22 days had elapsed from the time of the murder to the time that all of the suspects were taken into custody. And the track record of the police, if you've been watching my videos for a while, the track record of the police has not been particularly good, as you all know, but in concern to the murder of Anita Cobby, they were pretty much right on there from the jump and trying to figure out who it was that had committed the atrocious crime. And as I watched the Crime Investigation Australia, many of the police that attended the scene when Anita's body was discovered were absolutely disgusted by the level of brutality that had been levelled against Anita, and one of them would go on to say that she still had a look of horror on her face when they turned her over to examine her, as she was found face down, laying in the paddock. Well, they had to turn her over to examine the extent of her injuries, and they would go on to say that she still had a look of absolute terror on her face even after death. So I think just the injuries that she had sustained and the brutality of it, the police were pretty keen to bring her attackers to justice. So the 5 men charged, who later all pled guilty or were convicted of the murder, had over 50 prior convictions for offences including armed robbery, assault, larceny, car theft, breaking and entering, drug use, escaping lawful custody, and receiving stolen goods, and sexual assault. The trial began in Sydney on the 16th of March 1987. Before proceedings began, Travers changed his plea to guilty. Sydney newspaper The Sun published a front-page story on the day of the trial, and carrying the headline, Anita Murderer, Man Guilty, alongside a large image of Travers. The news story also referred to Michael Murphy as an unemployed prison escapee of no fixed address, and another in the same paper detailed Murphy's criminal convictions and his recent escape from Silverwater Correctional Centre. And he was actually serving a 25-year sentence for a string of burglaries and thefts. The jury was discharged due to the potential prejudicial information published about Murphy. So obviously that jury was dismissed and a new one was brought in. According to the medical examiner's report, Cobby's body showed extensive bruising on her head, breasts, face, groin, thighs and legs, consistent with a systematic beating, including a blow of considerable force around her right eye. She also had lacerations on her hips, thighs and legs from the barbed wire, several cuts to her neck. Oh boy, and this is awful, this next part, resulting in the severing of her ear and windpipe and almost decapitation. There were many defensive wounds to her hands and fingers, resulting in the near severing of 3 of her fingers, which was likely occurring when she raised her hands to her face and neck to protect herself from the knife. The medical examiner later testified that after Cobby's throat was cut, she would have died within 2 minutes, and this was after enduring hours of torment at the hands of her captors. He also testified that some radio bulletins purportedly based on his own report contained misinformation about the type and extent of Cobby's injuries. She was not mutilated apart from the slashing of her throat and hands. There had been no attack with a knife to her stomach or private area, and her shoulders had not been dislocated. But she had enough of the other injuries that they had done to her, so at least she didn't have all that as well. The trial for the remaining members of the gang lasted 54 days, with the men's defence relying on convincing the jury of their minimal involvement on the beating and the murder. On the 10th of June 1987, all 4 were found guilty of sexual assault and murder. On the 16th of June, they were sentenced in the Supreme Court of New South Wales, life imprisonment plus additional time without the possibility of parole. Also, their files have all been marked never to be released. Justice Alan Maxwell described the crime as one of the most horrifying physical and sexual assaults. This was a calculated killing done in cold blood. The executive should grant the same degree of mercy they bestowed upon their victim. And I remember, and they do show it on Crime Investigation Australia, just angry mobs of people, just from the community who didn't even know Anita but were sickened by what was done to her. And they were lined up, screaming and yelling at the offenders as they were taken into the court and they were being transported by the police. There were people spitting at them. There were people, just saying exactly what they thought of these men. And I can remember, Mum and the neighbours and everybody sitting around and talking about this. And I can remember one of our neighbours saying that, they should just line these guys up and shoot them. And I think it's a sentiment a lot of other people would have agreed with. But yeah, for being 12 years old and clearly remembering this absolutely horrific crime, I'll tell you how bad it is. And I never forgot Anita. I never forgot the interview with her parents and just how lost and defeated they both seemed at the loss of their beautiful daughter. So it's the families you need to think about as well. They have to go through the rest of their lives without their loved ones, and it's just absolutely shocking and disgusting that people can just do this to each other. That you just drive around and grab a girl off the street, brutalise her for hours, and then kill her and take her away from their family forever. It's just, I keep saying this in every video, and I said it in the last one as well, I know, but I get stuck. I just don't have a word for this. It's just so bad. There's just no way to describe it. So Anita's parents would join forces with Christine and Peter Simpson, the parents of murder victim Ebony Simpson. And I will be covering what happened to Ebony Simpson in a future video, so please stay tuned for that. It's another one you really need to hear about, and another one I remember. To create the Homicide Victims Support Group Incorporated. And this was a community support group that helps the families of victims deal with the heinous crimes. The Lynches also campaigned in seeking tougher sentencing and truth in sentencing laws, which eventuated after Anita's murder. Anita's father Gary died on the 14th of September 2008, aged 90, suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Her mother Grace died of lung cancer in 2013 at the age of 88. The Lynches had been married for 54 years at the time of Gary's death. As of 2022, John Travers was housed in Wellington Correctional Centre in maximum security. In 1988, he was transferred to Maitland Jail and was housed there until 1992, when he was transferred to Goulburn Correctional Centre. In 1996, he and another inmate were being transported from Goulburn to Long Bay Hospital at Long Bay Correctional Complex when they attempted to escape from prison. And that was in the prison van by hacksawing through and kicking in the back door. When the attempt was noticed, the van pulled over at Barrel Police Station and the two were arrested and charged. Travers was regularly kept in protection at Goulburn because he was often involved in bloody fights with the other inmates and threatening prison staff. From 2005 to 2015, Travers was housed in the Lithgow Correctional Centre. Travers was eventually transferred to Wellington Correctional Centre, where he is still housed to this day. Michael Murphy was housed in Long Bay Correctional Complex in maximum security. In 1988, Michael was housed along with his brother Gary in the newly built Special Protection Unit in Long Bay Correctional Complex. In 1992, he was transferred to Lithgow Correctional Centre, where he undertook Year 10 studies and did weekly work. A few years later, Michael Murphy was transferred to Goulburn Correctional Centre, where he spent most of his imprisonment, and he usually kept to himself and stayed out of trouble. In May 2015, he was reclassified to medium security until July 2015, when he was reclassified back to maximum security. In 2018, Murphy was transferred from Goulburn to Long Bay due to deteriorating health. In September 2018, it was reported that he had terminal cancer. Is it bad if I say yay? Doesn't deserve any better. And was living in palliative care. He died in Long Bay Hospital on the 21st of February 2019 at the age of 66. As of 2022, Gary Murphy was housed in Goulburn Correctional Centre in maximum security. In 1988, he was housed along with his brother Michael Murphy in the newly built Special Protection Unit in Long Bay Correctional Complex. A few years later, Gary Murphy was transferred to the Maitland Jail Correctional Centre, where he was housed till the prison's closure. In 2005, he was placed in Goulburn Correctional Centre and was housed there until June 2019. In mid-June 2019, he was transferred from Goulburn to Long Bay Correctional Complex. On the morning of the 25th of June 2019, he was severely beaten by several other prisoners in a shower block in 10 Wing in Long Bay and was transferred to hospital in critical condition. On the 23rd of August 2020, it was revealed by the Daily Telegraph that Murphy at some point had moved back from Long Bay to Goulburn. As of 2022, Les Murphy was housed in Goulburn Correctional Centre in maximum security. There was a long list of associates in the Goulburn Centre he was not allowed to have contact with. In 2005, he got into trouble for failing a urine test, allegedly. Michael Murdoch was formerly a maximum security inmate at Goulburn Correctional Centre until December 1999, when he was reclassified to medium security and transferred to Bathurst Correctional Complex. In 2002, Murdoch was reclassified as maximum security and transferred to Lithgow Correctional Centre. After the death of Michael Murphy as of 22nd of February 2019, New South Wales Corrective Services confirmed the 4 other offenders were still alive and were still serving out their life sentences in various maximum security correctional centres across New South Wales. But it could not be revealed where they were currently being housed. So that's where we come to the end of this video, and rather than end this video with memories of the callous and brutal attackers, I would like to end this video remembering the beautiful Anita Cobby. At only 26 years old at the time of her death, Anita was described as a kind and caring young woman with her entire life ahead of her. She was adored by her parents and her sister. She was also well liked and admired by her friends and colleagues at Sydney Hospital. She was a popular member of the staff with a promising career of nursing ahead of her. And as I said before, it was while nursing that she met her husband John, and as I said before, they were estranged at the time of her murder, but John still adored Anita. He was absolutely smitten with her, as he had been from the moment he had seen her, and he still adored her and was so looking forward to reconciling with Anita after the short separation. John remained haunted even after the sentencing. He would go on to say, "My life, my family's life, and Anita's family will suffer for the rest of our lives." And Cobby told this to the Daily Telegraph in 2016. He also blamed himself for Anita dying, and he still does. "I should have been with her," a despaired John admitted. He changed his name to John Francis and only gave one interview in 1987 before disappearing from the public eye. He left Australia to work in England, but then returned to Australia and changed his name back to Cobby in 2016. And I honestly hope John is doing well now and is somewhat happy, and my heart absolutely goes out to John Cobby. A park in Sullivan Street, Blacktown, was named the Anita Cobby Reserve in memory of Anita Cobby. And that is where we leave today's case, and oh my god, that was a lot. So I urge you guys, go watch something happy after this one, go play with your kids, cuddle a puppy, because this, it has to be one of the most horrible cases I've ever covered here on the channel, but I had to do it because, as I said before, Anita never left my mind from the age of 12, so I really wanted to do this video for her. And as I said before, a lot of my colleagues here on YouTube have also done videos on Anita. And I just feel if, we keep doing videos about these atrocities that happen, people won't forget. And it might help for the laws to be changed to be even harsher for offenders such as these. So this is, I guess, and I'd say a lot of us do feel this way, our small way of trying to do something to help, even these many years later, for these cases that, you can't forget. And I couldn't forget Anita. I couldn't forget Sally Ann Huxted. I couldn't forget Juanita Nielsen. These are people that I've never been able to get out of my mind all these many years after the murders and the crimes that happened. And so this is my small way of making sure they're never forgotten, and making sure that hopefully at some point, if enough awareness is out there, crimes like this may be at least minimised. I don't think they'll ever stop because, as we all know, there is something rotten in human nature in some of these people. If you can call them people, I just call them monsters because I don't have any other word for them. And I think it brings awareness to always be aware of your surroundings. Don't walk alone at night by yourself. And I know we should all have the right to go where we want and do what we want at any time of the day and where we want, but because of this element in human nature, we can't. We simply can't. And I'm just hoping that the more of us that do these kind of videos and the more people that watch be like, yeah, that happened to her. I don't think I'm going to walk home. I think I'm just going to stay with a friend, or I'm going to grab a taxi, or I'm going to get Dad to pick me up if I can't get it. Honestly, if you're in a situation like Anita, which probably wouldn't happen these days because we do have cell phones, but just for argument's sake, if your cell phone's busted, if the payphone's busted, if they even have them anymore? Do they even have payphones anymore? I'm not sure they do, and there's no taxis. Go to an area that's well lit, where there's people, even if you have to go and ask, if you're at a train station or something, may I sit in the office with you? And, there's nobody else around, I'm a little bit afraid. Or can you ring my father for me? I mean, it's just, this didn't have to happen. This is one of these crimes I wish didn't happen, and you wish you could just have a time machine and go back and warn her, please don't walk home, you're going to be killed. But if you're in a situation similar to that, go where there's people, where there's lights, and wait until there is a safe opportunity for you to continue your journey. Even if you're going to be late for work or something, your boss isn't going to mind if you explain what happened. They'd rather you arrive late than not at all. And, this is the same for anything. Everybody, just please stay safe. So, as I said, go watch something happy and fun after this video. I'm going to have to go and find something cheerful to watch after this, because this case was a lot for me, because I've never gotten it out of my head ever since it happened. Anyway, as always, thank you all so much again for watching, particularly my subscribers that are back every week and are continuing to support me, and my new subscribers who are talking to me and telling me what they'd like to see. Also, I do have some requests for some videos. I will still be doing the requests that you guys have made, Sam in particular. Shout out to Sam. She always watches and she always comments and she always gives me an idea of another video I can do. I'm still playing catch up after being so ill with the histamine intolerance and COVID. I'm still dealing with fatigue, although I'm getting better every day, which is great. And I'm still playing catch up on the requested videos, but please stay tuned, everybody, because I will be getting to them shortly. Hopefully, they'll probably be the next videos I do, because I do need some light relief from these heavy cases that I have been covering every week. So that's it for this one. Warm hugs, everybody. If you're in Australia, rug up, drink your hot chocolate or your coffee, wear your scarf, keep warm, and I will see you all again in my next video. Bye.